everyone. My name is Firasha Shaikh, and the topic of my paper is Digital Technologies as a Means of Regulation and Control, Muslims in the Surveillance City of Hyderabad. So basically, in this research paper, what I've tried to do is, so this is in two parts. In the first part, I've tried to show the various kinds of digital surveillance technologies that are being used, and I took Hyderabad city as a case study for the larger conversation around mass surveillance measures. And so in the first part, I've discussed the various kinds of mass surveillance measures that are being used in Hyderabad city, how those measures are negatively impacting Muslims and other marginalized communities. And in the second part of the paper, what I've tried to do is to identify the most commonly given justifications for mass surveillance measures and to highlight the problems in those justifications, the negative consequences of using those justifications for deploying mass surveillance measures. Now, the main research questions that I've tried to raise through this paper are, what are the consequences of these mass surveillance measures? Are the cited justifications valid, or do they need to be further examined, further scrutinized? And most importantly, what legal safeguards and grievance redressal mechanisms are in place to prevent any potential misuse? What are the crucial demands that we need to make that should be included in laws or policies related to the use of digital surveillance technologies? Now, Hyderabad city is on its way to becoming one of the most surveilled cities in the world. Amnesty International, a human rights organization, has, through its research project on Hyderabad, shown that Hyderabad is on the brink of becoming a total surveillance city. There are a number of digital surveillance technology measures that Hyderabad city is currently using. The foremost is the construction of a command and control center, which is basically a massive building in which real-time data processing of over 6 lakh CCTV cameras in Hyderabad city is being done. And CCTV cameras is another facial recognition technology, FRTs, which in the form of CCTV cameras and other means, biometric data collection from citizens, cordon and search operations by the police, and more. These measures, as I have argued, negatively impact the Muslim community as well as other marginalized communities. And the police does data collection from individuals, entering them into a huge database. This leaves the data of citizens vulnerable. And so the problem is that these measures, they erode the boundary between public sphere and private sphere. There is indiscriminate collection of data without accountability. It raises various ethical concerns and challenges. And most importantly, these mass surveillance measures, they contradict a very basic democratic principle, which is that the government should be accountable to citizens, and citizens should have the right to hold government accountable. Mass surveillance measures completely invert this democratic principle and put more power into the hands of government over the citizens, when it should be the other way around. And on the other hand, we have the dilemma of ensuring law and order on one hand and protecting fundamental rights of citizens on the other. So in the second part of my research paper, as I mentioned, so in this table on the left-hand side, we have the most commonly given reasons for mass surveillance, table A. And on the right-hand side, table B, I have the critiques of these particular reasons. So the first most commonly given reason for the use of digital surveillance technologies, specifically CCTV cameras, is that it helps to control the crime rate. It helps in maintenance of law and order. Politicians, in fact, use the growing numbers of CCTVs as a proof of their commitment towards maintaining law and order. However, the research shows us that there is no correlation between more number of CCTV cameras or that it has any effect on the crime rate. More number of CCTV cameras do not necessarily translate to less number of crimes. In fact, what CCTV cameras do is that they record crime. They do not prevent them. So the crime rates do not necessarily go down because you have more CCTV cameras. So this is the first commonly given reason for mass surveillance. The second commonly given reason is the collection of data for the purposes of national security and for improving the criminal justice system. Now, the problem with this is, as we have seen in the case of Hyderabad, the way the police collects private data and biometric data of citizens, is that the style and method in which this data collection is done contradicts many important fundamental rights. It goes against Article 14 of the Indian Constitution, which guarantees the right against arbitrary state action. It goes against Article 20 of the Constitution, which guarantees the right against self-incrimination. It also goes against Article 21, which gives a person a right to a free and fair trial. It goes against Article 22 of the Constitution that protects citizens against arrest and detention in certain cases. And here, as far as data collection is concerned, it's not just the government, but also private companies and big corporations, big data and big tech corporations that are guilty of massive data collection without any policy or without any accountability. Recently, we had the Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023, which was passed. However, this act has been criticized by many academics and researchers for excluding some important elements which are necessary for data protection for protection of data. Most importantly, that there has to be a separate body which oversees the use of mass surveillance measures. That is missing. And then clearly specified that both public authorities as well as private companies should come under the law regarding data protection. That is also missing from the act, and other various important things. The third reason that is given for mass surveillance measures is national security and counterterrorism measures. But in fact, it has been proven that for effective counterterrorism, one has to address the root causes of terrorism and do counter-radicalization measures rather than resorting to mass surveillance measures, which negatively impact the entire population and most negatively impact the marginalized communities. And then the fourth reason that is given is assessing damage during natural calamities and providing for relief efforts. Now, there is a very important, in the very important judgment, the Puddaswamy judgment, the four-pronged test was given. Number one, that any government agency which is using mass surveillance measures has to pass the four-pronged test. And number one, legality. Number two, necessity. Number three, proportionality. And number four, procedural guarantees against abuse of interference in the right to privacy. And this reason, providing relief efforts during natural calamities, and therefore we need CCTV cameras, etc., this reason does not pass the proportionality test. Now, mass surveillance measures, as we can see overall, are not a solution to the problem of crime rate, law and order, safety and security. Rather, they tend to increase a punitive or a carceral approach when, in fact, we as a society, as a country, should be moving towards a more transformative justice model rather than increasing the carceral or punitive approach model, which is what mass surveillance does. So long-term measures would include addressing the root causes of crime, terrorism, such as poverty, inequality, unemployment, and resolving the problems at social, political, and economic level at a structural level. These are some long-term measures that have to be taken seriously. And in terms of short-term measures, what should be done is the first and most important, the suggested amendments to Digital Personal Data Protection Act should be implemented. Along with that, unless and until there is an informed dialogue between different stakeholders, there has to be a moratorium on the use of FRT and a ban on the export of FRT for mass surveillance purposes. These are some short-term measures that have been suggested. That was it for my a very brief and quick summary of my research paper. Thank you very much.